Today's guest is Julia Cancro, author of More Than Cash, What to Do with Your Money Now That You're Finally Making Some, and a senior account director at Salesforce. Julia has spent her career at Fortune 500 companies, gaining firsthand insight into how professionals navigate career growth, financial decisions, and the challenges of building long-term security. Along the way, she noticed that many high-achieving colleagues struggled with understanding what to do with their money, and that inspired her to write a guide that makes finance approachable, practical, and jargon-free. From managing career milestones to making strategic financial choices, Julia's journey shows what it looks like to combine professional ambition with financial confidence. In this conversation, she shares lessons from her own career, practical advice for navigating money and work, and the mindset shifts that have helped her and others level up in both areas. Julia, welcome to the Her Workplace Unfiltered podcast.
Thank you, Marilyn. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like it's very rare that workplace and unfiltered are paired. So I love this pairing.
Yes, we're definitely going to get into it. I actually want to start off with learning more about your career journey. I know we're friends, and honestly, I haven't even really gotten to know you in regards to your career. So would love to learn more about your story.
Yeah, for sure. I can take you on that arc. For the listeners, Marilyn and I used to live like 2 doors down from each other in the East Village. So maybe we've come a long way from that street together. When I was in college, I studied psychology and Spanish. And to many people's surprise, I interned in finance. I thought that's what I wanted to do. I did 2 summers in sales and trading. And in that internship, I realized very quickly that in order to wake up at the crack of dawn and get myself to the office at 5:45 in the morning, I would need immense passion for what I was doing in order to reach my potential. And I observed the passion that my peers had and could recognize that that was not within me for the subject matter, and decided after 2 summers that that was not the career path that would help me reach my potential. That was a really hard decision. I was only like 21 at the time. And it was a hard decision because it was a glamorous job at a great company. It was the coveted internship. Every kid that was interning was like dying for that role. And to realize that it was like my first big realization or first moment of the path that I'm on is not the path that is going to help me reach my potential, which is something that I don't think, we're ever prepared for.
Right.
High school, you're on a path. College, you're on a path. And then I was on the path and I was like, I don't want the path. And so I went back to the career center at school and was like, please help. I don't want to do finance. And as many career centers do, they were like, great, what about consulting? And I was doing these internships or these interviews rather for consulting, and a Notre Dame alumni, that's where I went to school. Notre Dame alumni was helping me through the interview process. And he said that his previous role, he had been a buyer for Apple. And I was like, what's being a buyer? It's interesting. I didn't know anything about the world of buying. And at the highest level, being a buyer is at a company, you are choosing the assortment that you sell to customers. And you're working on the pricing strategy and the assortment strategy to make sure that you have a balanced assortment to sell your customers. And in that moment, I was like, maybe that's what I want to do. He described it as running a business within a business. And so another pivot, I didn't get the role with McKinsey that I thought I was going to get. And so I ended up starting interviews for buying and merchandising roles and got a couple of offers that were from great companies. And I ended up going to L Brands, which is the parent company of Victoria's Secret, working for Victoria's Secret's direct channel in New York City. Victoria's Secret's headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. I was in New York for the direct channel. That was when VS had a catalog still and was just like pivoting to internet.
Wow.
And so I was in this merchandising role. I did that for 4 years, then went to a startup like most 26-year-olds. I was like, I want a higher title and I want to go work for a startup because that's what all my peers were doing. And so I left VS and I went to a startup where we were launching clothing lines for celebrities. And it was like truly the worst year of my life, but the most important career decision that I made.
Yeah.
And when I made the decision to leave VS and go to this like unknown startup where we had 4 employees, my parents were like, you're leaving a really stable, great company with a 401k and all of the benefits and the career path that we see for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to this company that isn't really real yet. It's like 4 people and you have no product and there's no 401k and there are no benefits. What do you do from there? And I believed in the concept, quote unquote, but I more believed that I wanted to take this risk. I was 26. I didn't own an apartment. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I didn't even have a dog. Like I didn't really have many responsibilities other than myself. So I made the leap. It was the worst year of my life. It was working insane hours. Some of the people I worked with were great. Some were completely insane. That's one piece of career advice. If you are interviewing with someone and they appear to be crazy, they are much crazier when you start working with them.
So true.
So that was a lesson I learned the hard way. And after about a year of that and working crazy hours, we ran out of funding and I was out of a job. And I had been starting to interview or at least apply for other jobs when I was in that role. It wasn't even that I wasn't getting anything. I was reading the descriptions and I was like, oh, this sounds kind of lame. I know what behind the description means.
Right.
They say this, but I know what it really means and I don't want to do that. And what was interesting about this was when I was at this small company, I used a software for retail called Edited. It was an analytic software for merchandisers. And when I was leaving Icon Mod, when it was shutting down, the Edited team had set time on my calendar to do like user feedback. And I emailed them and I said, I'm still happy to provide user feedback, but my role here is wrapping, like the company's shutting down. Wouldn't expect to get paid on your invoices, but happy to have the conversation. And we had a great discussion. And I said at the end of the call, you guys are super smart. I really like what you're doing. I am looking for a new role. Are you hiring? And they said, yeah, they actually were hiring for sales and customer success. And at that point, I had no sales or customer success experience, but I thought about what I wanted to do in the arc of my career. And I convinced myself that sales was a skill that I needed to acquire for any future role that I would have in my career. Because at the end of the day, every business is sales. So I convinced myself I needed to acquire that skill. And I said, I'll do that for, I don't know, a year till I figure something else out. I was at Edited for a year and a half. I really loved it. And from there, I went to Salesforce. Now, this was a very long answer to your question of career journey. But what I learned in that, and I've been at Salesforce for 6.5, almost 7 years. It has been a great experience. I've stayed in the sales role. I'm an account director. So now I work with retail companies who are looking to buy software. So I sell the Salesforce full suite of products to retail clients. My retail background comes in handy because I have a deep understanding of what they're trying to accomplish. Most of the roles that I work with today at my clients are not the role I had when I worked at Victoria's Secret. I work with a different persona, but still the background in retail helps. And I think for anyone who's looking to move from industry to tech, it's important to think about a stepping stone in between. So if you're a teacher and you think you want to get into tech, maybe start looking at ed tech companies. If you're in healthcare and you want to get into tech, there are healthcare tech companies, same with financial services, same with retail. It's a common question that I get from people. I get a lot of messages on LinkedIn of, hey, saw you worked in retail and now you work at Salesforce. I work in retail and I would like to work for a company like Salesforce. Can we chat? And the advice I always give is you need that stepping stone in between. I shouldn't say blanket statement. You need it. There are people who probably can make the leap, but most often you need that stepping stone in between to link up your industry experience and a big tech company.
And you're right. It's all about acquiring those skills along the way that will build up and give you that momentum to be able to go where you want to go.
I have this conversation with my dad all the time. I'm 35 and I feel like I'm well into my career. And he always reminds me, you are still in the first innings.
Yes.
You are in the beginning stages.
So true.
And it depresses me a little bit because I feel like I've been slogging away for a while here. But I still do view most of the roles that I pursue to be, the goal is to acquire a certain skill that or an experience that I don't have under my belt. So as I think about my next roles at Salesforce, I'm looking at my own repertoire of skills and saying, what am I lacking that would prevent me from reaching the levels that I want to reach one day in my career?
Right.
And then I go seek roles that align with those skills that I'm missing.
Yep.
And that can be hard sometimes. Like it can be very challenging to step into a role where you feel like you're really lacking the background or the skill that you went to acquire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the worst year of your life, working for the startup. What was that experience like, kind of going through the motions? And then when you came out of it, what were those learnings that you took away? And this is really for those of you that are listening and maybe going through a similar situation where you may feel stuck, or you may feel like it's not the right place, or you may be unhappy in the role that you're in. I want to go back to that experience.
So when I was it's very difficult when you're in a role that feels challenging or that you're really unhappy in to remember why you went. And so now, like, the advice I would have given to myself then is probably write down like why you came here. Why did you make the decision to come to this particular role? And usually there's more than one reason. Like, if you're going to a startup, a lot of people back in 2016, when I made that leap, it was like unicorn startup land days where everyone thought they'd go to a startup and make $1 billion. And so if that's the only reason, and it's clear that that's not about to happen, it's very hard to stay.
Right.
But if you can write down 3 to 5 reasons of why you went to that role, what you hoped to learn, what you are gaining now, relationships you're building, exposure you're getting, experience you're getting, then it makes it a little bit more palatable. If those reasons why you went are no longer aligned with the experience you're having, then it's time to do some soul searching about, do I need to make a change? And that was the experience I was having at that time, where I was realizing that the reasons I went were no longer like what my experience was. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, the decision was made for me. The company ran out of money. So I got kicked out of the nest sooner than maybe I would have made the change on my own. And that forced me to open my scope in terms of what roles I was really open to. And I think that's an important lesson that I've taken with me in my career is like, keep the funnel open. Don't clamp down too soon and say, okay, I'm in this merchandising role, therefore merchandising is my path. That experience forced me to open the funnel and say, okay, what other skills do I have or do I want to acquire? What other skills can I bring to a different sort of company? And that really unstuck my whole career.
Yeah.
Because it put me on a new path that has, in my experience, a lot more options for where I can go and types of companies I can go to and the sorts of roles that I can have.
I love what you just said about unstucking your career, because you're so right that so many of us get ourselves pigeonholed in thinking that, okay, I've been in this role or I've been in this company for several years. This is the path I'm going down. This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. But it's all about broadening your scope and accessing those opportunities and people and resources that are going to keep you learning and will keep you on your toes of potentially exploring other industries and other opportunities and learning about different fields. And that's what happened to me too, of being in commercial real estate brokerage, working for Fortune 100 companies for 12 plus years. Never in my mind did I ever think that I would become an entrepreneur. But it was during that time in corporate and during my own experiences that I started to develop a pain point and then started to think more about, do I want to be in this role for the rest of my career? Maybe there are other opportunities for me.
I think back to some advice or comment that my dad has made. This is more on the sales note because sales has a lot of emotional ups and downs. It's a total roller coaster. And he has said, when times are good, it feels like it's never going to end. When times are tough, it feels like it's never going to end. Both always end. He said that to me in the context of a deal win. I was like celebrating and he was like taking me down a notch. but I remember it when things feel great and when things feel tough, that like those times always end.
Yes, they do. Your career is ever evolving. So I want to talk more about navigating corporate for those that are listening that are in corporate environments. You've worked for some large Fortune 500 companies. What would you say is your biggest lesson in both navigating internal politics and then building influence inside of large companies?
Mm-hmm. Internal politics is always challenging. Mm-hmm. I tend to seek harmony. There are people who lead with different attitudes. Some are my way or the highway and everyone falls in line. Some try to make everyone happy, which also isn't always effective. I try to take a more harmonious approach, which means some difficult compromise sometimes. Sometimes it's doing things that people don't agree with and you ask them to take a leap with you. I always try to, I work with a lot of extended team partners in my role. And my MO is to always let them know what I'm thinking about the decisions that I make. And because most times I find that people's reaction to a decision is not that they don't like the decision so much, is that they weren't included in the journey of arriving at that decision. And if you can let people in on that and just say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm probably going to make this decision and I want you to be aware of it. That's a much easier conversation than the decision's made. They find out about it from someone else. And then they're like, wait, what? This impacts me.
Yeah.
So I've found that letting people in on the thought process goes a really long way when it comes to keeping the harmony and navigating politics. I'm in sales, as I mentioned, and we always say when you're selling to a customer, you can't be single-threaded, meaning if you're trying to get a big deal done and you only have one point of contact at the customer, that's not enough. And the same is true in your own career. If you're at a big company and you only have one mentor or one sponsor, it's not enough. That person might leave. And then you've got no coverage up here. I've heard it said, I don't know if it's true, but I think I have reason to believe it might be true that 90% of what happens in your career will be decided when you're not in the room. It is important that you have advocates above you and laterally and below you, like all different levels. And I think the best way to do that is by communicating with people, being open with them, asking for their advice. People love to be asked for their advice and just having a genuine open dialogue. I find sometimes when people seek my advice, they come to the table with like a long list of their accolades because they want to impress or they want me to be a supporter of them. That is all stuff that I can find out in a dashboard or on your LinkedIn. Like if I'm going to, align myself to you and offer you support, I want to know you as a person and what you are seeking, not everything you've already accomplished.
Yeah. I want to talk about mentorship and sponsorship. How have in your career those relationships played a role in your career growth? And how did you find and build those relationships?
Mentors can become sponsors, I think, and sponsors can become mentors, I think, as your career changes. Typically, a mentor is, I think of it as someone who you really trust implicitly, that you can vent to them, you can cry to them, you can ask them, I don't know what to do, what should I do? And trust that they're going to give you, an honest read and tell you when to not do something. Like, don't send that email or wait 45 minutes and cool off, things like that. A sponsor to me is someone that I want to be a little bit more buttoned up in front of. And I want to ask them, there are 3 roles that I'm considering. What in your career perspective or in your trajectory, what's your perspective on these 3 different roles? How should I be thinking about them? And understand like how they thought about navigating their career. A mentor can do the same, but to me, a mentor has like more of the like emotional vulnerability, where a sponsor, I want to show up as my best self to them all the time.
Yeah. Because they are those people that are saying your name in rooms that you're not in and advocating for you.
Exactly. And a mentor can become that one day, depending on how their career evolves. And a sponsor, as your own career evolves, may become more of a mentor. Both are equally important, I think.
Yeah. And do you think it's important to have both of those types of relationships, both inside of your company and outside of your company?
I think depending on what sort of company you work for, definitely. Like I wouldn't limit yourself to just inside your company or just outside. Often it's helpful to have someone inside the company who understands the dynamic.
Right.
It's easier to give advice about what to do in a certain company environment when you understand the landscape. One of the pieces of advice that I got from a mentor sponsor, I guess, more of a sponsor, and I'll get to your question about how you form those relationships. But I thought this was an important piece of advice when you're trying to look at either a role or your career overall. There are 7 different facets that people say to look at, and I'm going to read them. So 7 things to consider when you're pursuing a role or your career: money, power or influence, responsibility, or like what's your purview, what's your remit, work-life balance, personal growth, purpose or impact, and then freedom, autonomy. And those 7 things, you can't have all 7 in a role.
Right.
So you need to figure out for you at that point in your life, what are the 2 or 3 that you're going to prioritize as you seek your next role. My first boss at Victoria's Secret said that her aunt always used to tell her, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. So you can reach the pinnacle of your career. You can have a family. You can be a great mom. You can be a great partner. You can be a great boss, but you can't always do all of those things at the same time.
Right.
And this is, to me, the same version of, this is the career version of that, or the like role version of that, where you have to pick, is my next role, do I really just care about making a lot of money? Maybe that means it's a different title than you thought. Or if you care the most about like purpose and impact, maybe that means you're not having the same power or influence at a grand scale, but you have influence over a smaller group, and that might be more meaningful to you. So it's really a matter of what you choose to prioritize at that point in your career.
Right. That's really helpful. And 2, it makes me think more about sometimes your role or your 9 to 5 obviously is not going to meet all of those expectations. So there's other ways that you can find those things in activities or hobbies or passions of yours or side projects. You can find those things in other areas.
Completely. I mean, that's part of why I ended up writing the book. You mentioned it at the start. It didn't start off as something that I said like, oh, I want something outside of work to fulfill me. Like it didn't start off like that, but it has ended up being so much more fulfilling than I ever could have imagined. It started from a frank conversation with a friend who I work with, who said, I'm making some money. I'm starting to save money now. I don't know what to do with it. I just have it sitting in a savings and checkings account. Am I supposed to do more? Do you invest your money? And I realized in that moment that I had a unique advantage or background, that I interned in finance. A lot of my friends studied finance in college, so I've been sort of surrounded by it. And most importantly, my dad was in finance. So growing up, that was just a topic of conversation. When I got my first job, he was like, okay, you have to open a 401k. It was not an option. And so I said to my friend Lane, yeah, like I'll find some resources for you. No problem. I'll send you something so that you can get started. I went home, I started Googling, and I realized that for where she was in her personal finance journey, she had already figured out how to budget and, live within her means. And she was now saving money. For that point in her personal finance journey, there wasn't a consolidated resource that I could share with her that was like a personal finance 201 guidebook. There are lots of books on both ends of the spectrum that are great. That middle audience, at least in 2021, when she and I had this conversation, was mostly served by blog posts. And the blogs are amazing, but 2 limitations. 1, you have to know what to Google to find them. And 2, they're usually on one specific topic. So it will teach you about a 401k, but it won't teach you about a 401k in conjunction with a high yield savings account and how you should think about those things playing together. So after that, I said, you know what, I'll just write some stuff down in a Google Doc for you. And that was the beginning of the book. I sent it to her. She asked questions. I revised it. She was like, can you come to my apartment and teach a class to me and some friends? And so that was really the very beginning of what ultimately became More Than Cash.
Wow. That's amazing. And yeah, for those of you listening, Julia did write a book called More Than Cash. I want to kind of dig in there a little bit more. When you started writing this book, how did you get started? How did you find a publisher? Like, what was that journey like of building this like side project of yours?
Publishing was harder than writing the book, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, it started as a very casual Google Doc written in my voice to my friend. And as she shared it around with people, people said to me, oh, you should get this published. This is super helpful. Nothing like this exists on the market. And I have a family friend who's in publishing, more on the fiction side. And I sent it to her and I said, are my friends blowing smoke or does this have legs? Like you've seen a lot. And she was like, I actually do think it has legs. I don't think they're blowing smoke. I think your voice is unique. I think they're right that there's not a resource like this that exists today. And I say today because since then, there have been some great books that have been published.
Right.
The difference between More Than Cash and those other books is More Than Cash is like 50 pages. It's a starter guide. It should take you 90 minutes to read. Sort of your like primer for getting deeper into some of these topics.
Right.
So I started shopping the book around or the manuscript around to publishers, and they all were like, this is great, but you're not famous. And I was like,
oh.
I know, you knew I wasn't famous when you took this call. And they're like, for nonfiction, we really like our authors to have a platform. So if you maybe start gaining a social media following, then in 6 months, we'll revisit this. And I was like, okay, these people are asking me to become an overnight influencer.
Yeah.
Like I have a very demanding day job and becoming an influencer is not my goal.
Right.
That's not what I'm good at. That's not what I want to do. And there was also no promise of a book deal if I got, 50,000 followers or whatever. So that was very disappointing to be like, wow, the whole nonfiction space has pretty much become publishing houses wanting guaranteed sales. They're not willing to take a risk on, a nobody and hope that they become a somebody. So then I did a lot more research, a lot of conversations with other authors. Karen Mangia, who's written some great books about customer success and business. She's like a Wall Street Journal bestseller. She worked at Salesforce and I had a conversation with her. And she introduced me to this concept of a hybrid publisher, which is a publishing house that has distribution, meaning relationships with booksellers, but does not have a PR or marketing arm.
Okay.
And that ended up being the route that I went down. And, not having a marketing or PR team behind your book is very challenging.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of grassroots, a lot of great podcast conversations. I've done a lot of speaking engagements at Google, Netflix, my own company, Salesforce, Slack, and partnering with some other women in finance. Female Invest is an amazing tech platform. Would recommend people check that out if you're interested in continuing the learning journey on personal finance.
Okay, so I want to ask you, what are the biggest mistakes that you see people make with their hard-earned money early in their careers?
Yeah, it's a great question. Spending it all, for sure, and not investing it. And I will give you some stories about that. So spending it all, right, means you don't have any money to invest. And investing it early is important because of compounding, which I'll talk about in a second. It's also important to know, and I think a lot of people make this mistake, that when you set up a 401k or an IRA and you start contributing money, you have to actively invest that. You don't have to select which investments, you just have to opt in to invest it. And that's important because if you don't do that, it's just sitting in cash. Why is sitting in cash not as good as investing it? Because of the gains that you are, if history is a predictor of the future, likely to see if you invest the money in the S&P 500. So one example, just a little mathematical equation that I like to tell is you have two people. We're going to talk about a 40-year span here. Person one invests $2,000 every year for 10 years. Person number two does nothing for the first 10 years and then invests $2,000 every year for the subsequent 30 years. So you've got person one who contributes $2,000 for 10 years and then nothing for 30 years. They've only put away $20,000. And person number two, nothing for the first 10 and then two for the next 30. So $60,000. They're saving 3 times the amount of money, of their hard-earned money.
Right.
At the end of the 40-year period, if we're looking at a conservative 7% return, who do you think has more money in the bank?
Number one,
exactly.
Yep.
Most people would think intuitively person number two because they've saved 3 times as much.
Yep.
But it's more about compounding returns over time. That's a 7% conservative return. If you apply the average market return from the last 50 years, which is about 11%, person number one has almost double what person number two has. So the biggest mistake is to not start early.
Right.
You might be listening to this saying, oh my God, I'm 30 and I haven't started. I missed out on some really critical years. You're still young. You still have time.
Yeah.
The lesson is don't wait till you're 40, 50, 60 and think you're going to catch up because you're presumably making more money then. It's not about the dollar amount that you save as much as it is when you start and what sort of compounding returns you get.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for professionals that are starting to build that financial confidence? They're starting to invest. They're starting to see those returns. How do you balance that with career ambition?
Well, first you have to read the book. That's the simplest solution. It's difficult because people think that talking about money is awkward. And I think my hypothesis is people think that talking about money is awkward because we as a society ascribe other somewhat irrelevant traits to people that have money. Like we think that if you have money, it means you are also a good person, smart, beautiful, easy to work with, whatever, like all these other great things, which are not necessarily true. Like I think it's a bit of a non sequitur to think that money means all those things. Because of that, we get awkward talking about it because we're like, oh, if I don't have money, it means I'm not all those other things. I'm not successful. I think the best way to remove barriers with regard to building wealth and saving your hard-earned money and building career ambition is to talk about it in a tactful way. Like I think having open conversations about finance, bring people to work to talk about it. We have speakers come all the time to talk about 401ks and investing platforms and things like that. And to be vulnerable that you don't know as much as you'd like to know. Ask the question. I don't know why people are afraid to ask questions about things that they've never been taught that they think they should know. Like we've never been taught a lot of this. We didn't learn it in like American high school. You probably didn't learn it in college unless you sought classes that taught it to you. And then you show up at work and someone's like, here's your 401k. You're supposed to know what to do with it.
And you're like, what is this?
There's no shame in saying, can you explain this to me?
Yeah.
When I first joined Salesforce, our 401k provider came to the office to have a conversation and open Q&A. Only 2 people came, me and some other girl. And we've got thousands of employees. There's no way 100% of them knew everything about what our 401k had to offer. In that session, I learned about a special feature in our 401k that has unlocked more savings and earnings potential for me. Ask the questions. It doesn't make you stupid to ask or to not know. And you are certainly smart enough to master the topics.
So I want to ask you just a few questions that we close with for every episode to really hear how our guests are leading on their own terms. The first question I want to ask is, what is one thing that you do each day to stay grounded?
There are a few things. I try to work out in the morning. My cup of coffee after I work out at home is an important ritual. I try to talk to my family a few times a week. I go to church once a week. And all of these like structures and frameworks of community and routine help keep me feeling grounded.
What is something that you used to think was necessary for success, but you don't anymore?
A big title. When I was in my early 20s, I thought you needed to have an SVP title or a C-suite title to indicate that you had made it. And now that I have more career experience, I look around and see the myriad of people who are incredibly successful with all different varying titles.
Yeah. What does building a career on your own terms mean to you?
One of my good friends shared some work advice that she had gotten that your career is a jungle gym, not a ladder. And so I try to think about my own career through that lens, that building it on my own terms means seeking roles that help me build a foundation and a certain set of skills. That doesn't always mean going straight up. There are certain career decisions that I've made that people have questions and said, well, why did you do that instead of this? This was the more obvious career path that you're supposed to follow. And
supposed to.
Exactly. And my perspective is that the other role over here afforded me the opportunity to learn something different that role would not have exposed me to. And I felt like I had many of the skills and experiences in that role already. And so I wanted to do something a little bit different. And that comes with some friction. You have to do some persuading at work when you're trying to pursue a role that isn't the traditional path.
Right.
People will question it. They will challenge it. Some people will tell you, no, can't be done. And so you just keep pressing.
Yeah.
Tactfully.
And again, it's more about building those skills along the way and having access to those opportunities.
If you have a very well thought out perspective on why a certain role is the right one for you versus another one, I have found that people are always willing to listen. If you're just pressing and saying, no, that's the one for me without a real explanation, and this goes back to bringing people on the journey of the decision process with you, I find that that's how you gain people who are willing to support the decision rather than challenge it.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing more about your career journey and your experience. Everyone go buy Julia's book, More Than Cash. And thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everyone for listening.